Hello, Ukraine. Hello, Columbus, Ohio. Those are just a couple of places where people listen or watch Odyssey House Journals, and we thank you for making us one of the most listened to and watched podcasts dealing with addiction and recovery. And actually, you may not know this, and I hope it doesn't make you nervous, but people are watching or listening all over the world, which is awesome. Sort of amazing. Which proves the fact that addiction isn't just limited to Salt Lake City or the United States.
That's awesome.
I'm Randall Carlisle. My usual co-host Rachel Santizo is off today, and we thank you all for being here. We usually try to start out with a little news story that I gleaned from somewhere, and I found this interesting because I hear a lot of people coming into Odyssey House admissions say that they are using gabapentin. Did you ever use gabapentin?
I was prescribed gabapentin, and before it became before they really diagnosed it or found out that people were getting addicted to it for nerve damage in my back, and then it became. This was years and years ago, but that's one that's being abused now for sure.
Exactly, and the news story says the number of overdoses linked to the prescription medication gabapentin used to treat nerve pain and seizures is on the rise, and from 2019 to 2020. 1 in 10 overdose deaths involved gabapentin.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And a lot of people come in, and I think in the old days that was one of the acceptable medications when people came into Odyssey House. Anyway, my guest, and I'm happy to have him, is a gentleman named Todd Hall. Todd, welcome.
Thank you.
I think one of the reasons people watch or listen to this podcast is that we talk to people who have dealt with the demon addiction and have come through. And people like hearing the stories because it's not a one and done kind of thing where you go to prison and you're cured, or you go to a treatment center and you're cured. You're never cured of addiction. It's a lifelong disease that you got to deal with. So maybe just share your story a little for us. And I hear it's a pretty wild one.
It's a pretty wild one. I don't know if I should tell it to you in reverse or from the start, or
whichever way you want to go.
It is something I deal with every day now, and it took me a long time to figure that out. 7 weeks ago, I had open heart surgery. I'd show you the scar, but it's probably not appropriate. But they cut me.
Can we zoom into a scar? Yeah.
They cut me open.
I saw the scar.
Yeah, I showed you. And in the past year, that was just my most recent blessing. I'm still alive. I shouldn't still be alive.
Are you really?
Right? I'm still alive, Randall.
If you weren't, I'll tell you, this would be a hell of a podcast.
I shouldn't still be alive.
Somebody back from the dead.
3 months prior to that, I ended my chemotherapy treatments for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was diagnosed last year in July. They told me you're going to die from it, but you're not going to die today. And so that's kind of my story up to date till now. I'm not going to die from that or from my heart. I believe I've been saved for a reason, but going back, wherever you'd like me to start. I grew up here in Salt Lake, in Sandy. My mom and dad are both educated at BYU. I had an awesome childhood. I had everything. I was spoiled. My mom spoiled me. The only thing really not going for me is I had red hair and freckles and glasses.
And that wasn't going for you?
Well, you could imagine in school I started to get teased, and that's where the bullying and stuff came in later in life, in my middle school and whatnot. But so I grew up with everything. Mom and dad, we were upper middle class. That was when Sandy was just starting to grow up on 23rd East there. It was
considered a pretty wealthy suburb.
Yeah, upper middle class or whatever you want to call it. I didn't know that as a child, but I just knew, I knew and know now, I had a good life and everything afforded to me. So Dad, we ended up moving up to Canada, southern Alberta. My dad's family's from there. We took over my grandpa's farm. He had hurt himself, and so total culture shock. Exactly.
Yeah. Good day,
Good day, and so I am 10 years old, spoiled, rotten, and sandy. Have everything I wanted: the bikes, the big wheels, whatever. Mom spoiled me rotten, and then we moved to the farm. Now all of a sudden, I'm gathering 100 and something head of cattle every morning to milk, throwing hay bales. I'm like, this isn't anything like Sandy. What's really going on here? And so culture shock, and then my uncle and my grandpa were both there. So I kind of had three father figures that would always discipline me. One would discipline me different than the other. I'm talking even down to the willow switch and stuff like this. So it was a struggle. Mom went through a nervous breakdown up there because this is where her family is. Dad moved us away from there and away from here, and she struggled as well. But school was hard. There was a native Indian reservation, so we blended schools. But these kids wanted to fight all the time, so I'd get beat up every morning when I got off the bus.
Really?
So yeah,
even though you were a big guy.
I wasn't. I was just starting to grow then, but I mean, there was 3 or 4 at a time, and they were in a boxing club up there, and they were taught how to box. And so basically, I mean, so that was kind of my first stint with violence, and I didn't know that at that young age.
Sure.
So it put something. It put something back here for me, some resentments and hate, whatever you want to call it. I didn't know how to label it as a child, but I didn't like that. I finally was able to, I started fighting back, and finally they probably just gave up. But that was my first stint with violence. And anyway, the farm didn't last. It couldn't support 3 families. We moved to St. George, and I'm just going into junior high. Still awkward looking, red hair, freckles, and glasses. Just moved from the farm now back to a city in St. George.
So you go to Sandy,
Southern Alberta, Carson, Alberta, and then down to St. George.
Yeah.
And that was rough. So I wasn't wearing farm clothes, but I wasn't fitting in St. George. So I found myself hanging out with these kids out at the end of the playground who were smoking cigarettes one day. So I started smoking cigarettes. 12 years old. One day, one kid brought a bottle of liquor from his parents' liquor cabinet. Oh man, I remember the first time I felt the warmth of that hit my stomach, because everything was amazing. I could be myself now. It didn't matter what I looked like. I could be myself now. It's an amazing feeling.
I had that same experience at about your age. I was uncomfortable around other kids, especially girls. And I got high drinking.
Yeah.
And it was like, all of a sudden, everything's okay.
Superman.
Yeah.
I still remember the day that I felt that first warm feeling, and I'm surprised I remember, because I've done a lot of drugs since, but you always remember that, and it's a struggle. I still it's a program, it's a reference point in my life, and so I started hanging out with these kids, and then marijuana came out one day. A kid brought some roaches from his mom's ashtray. As I look back now, all this stuff was afforded to us by parents.
Yeah.
I won't call them irresponsible, but an ashtray full of roaches, and what's a 12-year-old kid going to do? So this is how I was introduced, to alcohol and marijuana. And there was a young man, a friend of mine. He was 14 years old. He was 2 years older than me. And his sister gave him the wild idea that if we stole cars and brought them to Las Vegas where she lived, they would pay us $500 a car.
Which would buy a lot of booze and pot.
Which would buy a ton of it. So I'm 12 years old. I'm getting pretty big. This kid was way bigger than me, 14. He could have been a lineman for the Cowboys, my favorite team. But so I'm excited.
Wait
about
a minute.
this.
Cowboys are your favorite team. We're going to stop the podcast, and you've got to leave.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that. Yeah, we're struggling, Randall. So I don't know your team, but we're struggling, especially looking forward to this year. But so we get this harebrained idea, and at 12 years old, we go from Green Valley to Bloomington Hills to St. George and accumulate 13 counts of grand auto theft at 12 years old.
Jeez.
And we end up on the way to Vegas with a bottle of liquor, a carton of cigarettes on the dash, and an AR-15 in the back of his dad's, of his parents. I grew up hunting. My grandpa taught me how to hunt stuff. I didn't know why we had we didn't need a rifle, but we were shooting and drunk, and we ended up, the cigarettes caused the window to fog up. It was wintertime. Not bad, but it was cold. The one window fogged up, and he flipped 360s in the middle of I-15 and ended up in a burrow pit. Well, lo and behold, there was a Nevada Ranger behind us.
Ooh.
He comes over, he makes sure we're all right. He gets us out, and we're like, whoa, it's scared. I'm scared. But then we hear over his radio that the vehicle we're in just got called in stolen out of St. George, Utah, an APB. So he slams both of us on the hood of the vehicle, and I think I started crying.
You're 12.
I'm 12
Jeez.
years old.
Hey.
So this is my first stint with the law, rebellious. That group of kids accepted me, and here I am already doing stuff like this. We ended up in Las Vegas DT because we were past Mesquite, and that was scary. I was in there with kids who were convicted of killing cops at 16 years old, and they would say grace. I'm used to growing up as an LDS kid, so I didn't know about the grace, and they were wearing hairnets and tattoos already at their age, and so it was another culture shock, another wow. Somewhere in all that, Randall, I found it exciting. I don't know why that's exciting. The handcuffs didn't feel good. Getting slammed on the hood of a vehicle didn't feel good, but somewhere in all this, there was some excitement involved, and it opened the doors to my addiction.
How'd your addiction progress from there?
It stayed. I went to the state was going to give me away. They were taking me away from my parents. This kid's 12 years old. He's stealing cars. Just, you guys aren't good parents type thing. They took me to court. I ended up getting like 1,500 work hours for that. A lot of work hours. My grandpa from Fairview, Utah, his name's Curly, he came down to court and he stepped in and he said, I'll take the boy. I'll raise him. And I went with him. And he made me do all those work hours to the point where I would dig holes and fill them back in if there wasn't anything to do. My grandpa was a very honest and integral man and firm, and so I started going to school there in San Pete County, doing little things, smoking still cigarettes, and I came home one time and Grandpa smelled smoke on me. I didn't know about his past. He had some drinking and cigarettes in his past too, but he was now, a high member in the church and stuff, and he smelled the cigarettes and he said, "You've been smoking?" I'm like, "I haven't been smoking. I haven't been smoking." That was somebody at school that rubbed off on me. Right. And my grandpa started coming to school every day to the high school with me for 8 hours and sat in the auditorium where they ate lunch, hung out with all the cheerleaders and all the jocks, so I couldn't leave and go smoke. He would babysit me for 8 hours a day at school. This man was committed to my success. And I owe everything I know about being a man to him, but that got boring for me. Moved back in with my parents in Texas, and Dad came out of the closet. At 16 years old, my dad came to us, and he divorced my mom, and he told us he was going to live an alternative lifestyle.
Hey, kids, I'm gay.
I'm gay.
Jeez.
So at 16 years old, I'm just learning how to be a man, and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't handle it well. I hated him for a long time. I did. He took care of us still. He paid his child support, alimony. He was supportive, but I didn't understand the whole homosexual thing. Sure. It was just coming, part of the march back then. This was just coming anew.
Pretty controversial back in that day.
Definitely. And so it took a long time. I started acting on promiscuous behaviors, sexual behaviors with women, because I was going to prove, girls at that time, I was going to prove I'm not gay. Yeah. And so with those behaviors, I met a girl and we started having children. This is where my wife came in. We would eventually get married. And
at what age?
I was in my early 20,
Oh, okay.
19, 20,
Okay.
early 20s. Anyway, I was still smoking pot, drinking. Her family were Latino, they're Spanish descent, and they like to drink. And to fit in, I did that, and I was drinking all the time. I dropped out of school to frame houses. I was going to take care of my mom because she's a single mom now, but I ended up spending all my money on alcohol and drugs and investigating new drugs, trying new things, cocaine, mushrooms, things like that. But I started this family. I was working hard as a framer. I started a construction company at a young age. I framed probably over 400 homes in this valley. Yeah, so I was proud of that. I was good at it.
Making good money,
yeah,
too.
making real good money, and had a couple daughters by then. And one day, a friend of mine introduced me to crank, which is an amphetamine, and then meth came into my life. I tried meth, and it ruined me. Right, it hijacked the pleasure center of my mind and took me. Like so many people can testify to. I lost a construction company. I walked away from my family. I went to prison. I was charged with attempt to manufacture. I couldn't afford the meth. It was expensive. So I found guys at that time that were manufacturing. This was a big theme back in the late 90s
Right.
and early 2000s in Salt Lake, if you remember. And they were busting like 6 meth labs a day or something
Right.
there. Well, I was part of that nonsense. And they sent me to prison. And I did like 21, 23 months the first time in prison. I was away from my children. My wife would write me every day, but lo and behold, I didn't know she had moved on, and I got out on parole, and there was so much resentment and guilt for walking away from my family and my children that I went right back to using. It's the only thing I knew to take away that pain, to silence this baggage and wreckage of my past. I didn't last. I think my first parole was a few weeks after being locked up for 21 months. So this would go on.
So you went back to prison.
I went back to prison. Second time around, I got a call over the button one day. It was very cold the way they did it, and they said, "Hull, you need to call home. Someone died." I didn't have a phone call because I was on entry level. I was stuck in my cell for 23 and a half hours a day. I called home and they told me my baby sister, Becky, had died at 20 years old in a motel room in South Salt Lake.
From an overdose?
It was she had shot meth intravenously, and her heart had stopped from what's called, I believe, cardiomyopathy or something. Her aortas had hardened,
Okay.
so she couldn't handle it. And 7 of my friends were there, so-called friends, people I knew in the drug world. They cleaned up around her and left her in the motel room and called from the 7-Eleven. So it was hard for me. She was my baby sis. I should have been a better older brother. Lot of guilt from that. Couldn't go to the funeral. And so I got out. I swore I'd never use drugs again. I'm going to live her life as a legacy, all these things. I got out and I used again. I couldn't handle the pain. I thought I couldn't handle the pain. I didn't know how to deal with that pain. I thought she was still out here somewhere because I never was able to say goodbye to her. I went back to state prison again and finally terminated, but I still wasn't right. I had all this stuff behind me that was creeping over the top of me, destroying me, and I was letting it destroy. I didn't know a way out. All I knew that was meth would fix everything. It was like a total transformation. When I use meth, all the pain goes away. A week before I got out of state prison, a federal prosecutor showed up in state prison, and I was indicted for something I did on parole a year prior. So I thought I was done with prison, and I'm a week away from getting out of Draper, and they indict me to the federal system. Back to jail I go. I'm in Davis County, and I get that call over the button again that someone's died in my family. And cold again. And I call home, and they told me my 16-year-old daughter had committed suicide.
Ooh.
And so, now if you can already know, I've already got all this. I can't hold any more stuff ready. Like, this is hurting. This is too much. Being the poor father I was, a poor example, all this guilt. I really didn't want to live past that point. There's no way I could kill myself in that jail. There's nowhere to hang myself. I literally was contemplating suicide. That's how bad it was. And I ended up going through the federal system 2 more times. I just couldn't get it right. I just could not stay away from the meth and the drugs and the lifestyle and crimes. I started committing crimes to feed my habit. All crimes are horrible. I look at it now. I don't even speed anymore, Randall. I don't drive past the speed limit to this day after all I've been through. So I couldn't get off parole. I couldn't get, they terminated me to stay. The feds finally terminated me. Judge Winder, my sentencing judge in Salt Lake, says, "You're ungovernable. We can't do anything. We give up." And they finally terminated me. And I still got out, and I started living, just functioning as an addict, committing crimes to feed my addiction, and it's the worst feeling in the world, functioning as an addict and not getting caught or not having someone step in and stop you. I did this for a long time. I caught a couple little charges, but it got to the point in 2017, 5 years ago, I was with a lifelong friend of mine, and I won't go into a lot of it, but the circumstances, but I was in a car driving, and he was jumped by some gang members. This was a retribution thing. He asked me to back him up, and we were going to go tune these guys up. I've never been part of the gangs. I've loved and hated everyone equally. It was all about just who I could buy drugs from or sell drugs to. It wasn't about color or gang affiliation. Anyway, he was a lifelong friend, so I go to help him, and he got out of the car one morning, unbeknownst to me, and shot and killed somebody in front of me. And that was kind of, I won't say the icing on the cake, 'cause it's not the proper term, but it was like, wow. So these deaths of innocent girls is what it is. I was in tears. Where do you go with all this? I cannot put any more in this bag of resentments and remorse and guilt, and I can't live like this anymore, and I don't know what to do with all this. I ended up calling Kim from Odyssey. I was crying. I need help, Kim. She had a lot of sobriety by this 5 years ago. And Kim and I actually known each other from years ago. When she was on the other side, we lived in the same Midvale town, and we did a lot of things together. So I looked up to her, and I called her, and I said, I need help. Now, she said, well, come into Mill Creek. I had already been sentenced to Odyssey House once, to the adult house on one of my paroles. I left after 6 hours. I snuck out the back door.
After 6 hours?
Yeah, I didn't even know you could go out the front door. So I sneak out the laundry room window, I think is what it was. So I was skeptical because I knew how hard the program was. I knew people had been there 3 and 4 or 5 years, I couldn't commit to a day of sobriety, so I didn't know how this was going to work. And I went to Mill Creek, and I was there almost a year. But it took a long time to even get to the point where I could start working with these things that I'd done in my life. This was trauma for me, and what I've realized, and speaking with a lot of people in addiction or people who are struggling, most of our behaviors come from trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
Most all.
And you had a massive amount of trauma.
A huge pile of it. As tough as I thought I was, and a father who never told me he loved me, a few times, but mom was very affectionate and dad wasn't. He, obviously for reasons. He was dealing with his own. And by the way, I'm real close with my dad today. We've worked through that. Yeah.
Good.
He lives in Dallas, and he's amazing. He's always taken care of his responsibilities still to this day with my mom, because my mom needs help. So Yeah, it's that relationship. I'm rebuilding relationships, but I went to Odyssey for almost a year, and I took some guys out. I was a navigator, and I was dirty. I was chewing and vaping. And I took some guys out on an appointment. They were supposed to go to the hospital. The kid tried to talk me into stopping at his girlfriend's, which was on the way to the hospital. And I've known him for a long time, too. We go way back. And I should have said no. I'm a navigator. I'm supposed to know better. And we went there, and I'm sitting on the couch while he's with his girlfriend, and the girl pulled out a meth pipe after I'd been sober now. I sat in jail for 2 years on that charge before they charged me with obstruction of justice, but they know I didn't have anything to do with it. But it was a long time in jail. And after all this time, I relapsed again. Everything, all these behaviors I was working on at Odyssey, which is what I needed. Now, I've been in numerous treatment centers, 6 times in prison, done the prison programs.
Right.
I've learned something from all these things, Randall, and but it was like learn something, fall down, learn something, fall down. Keep getting up and falling down. I learned a lot in Odyssey, and I ended up in the hospital on a ventilator tube from that relapse. I went out and I tried to frame an addition on a friend's house in like a day, and I just depleted my body, and I ended up in the hospital. And it was an eye-opener. A lot of the staff from Odyssey was worried. Everybody was worried. The judge had no remorse. She had me on no tolerance probation from that serious charge. She's not trying to hear this. I used one time. She put me in jail, and I did the CAPS program with Tamara and Leanne, and went through that. Got out, and I'm living. And if that wasn't enough, I still couldn't figure it out. I relapsed again. I finally went down just a couple years ago to Central Utah, a program called Matter. I don't know if I can say that on here.
Yeah, you can say anything.
It was finally then, the material is holographic in nature, quantum physics type stuff, and it finally, I don't know if it was the time, if it was my prayers, if it was my desperation, it finally clicked in me that what my energy was doing and my choices were doing to not only myself and my family, but my community as a whole. I never, when you're high and you're committing crimes and you're doing stupid things, it's always selfish.
It's about you.
It's always about you. It's about make me feel good, and I never realized. I knew I was so guilty about hurting my mom and my sisters, but I never thought about it as how it was affecting my community, my world, and my universe. My choices.
We got about 2 minutes left, so tell me, how long have you been sober now?
I'm over a year now.
Okay. Gonna stay sober?
I'm going to stay sober. Well, and it's like the open heart surgery scares me bad enough, but now I want to stay sober. I know my energy's changed. I know how my energy affects everybody all throughout the universe. How one crime trickles down to the whole community. And it was then when the compulsion to use was taken away.
So you don't have a compulsion?
I don't have the compulsion. There's times, all over this valley, I'll drive by somewhere where to reference, I did something there.
That's where I used to.
Somewhere, commit a crime there, and my hand will want to go this way with the car, and I slap it and I go to a meeting. I'm very involved in AA now. I have a sponsor who was just like me, who did all this stuff before me, who's helped me. And a lot of that is working with that baggage. I did some EMDR in Odyssey House for that trauma. But a lot of that is putting this behind me so that I can live for today.
And you're a prime example. A lot of people listen to this podcast or watch it because they have loved ones who are dealing with addiction. And how old are you now?
51.
So
35 years in addiction.
Yeah, and so unless you die from an overdose or for whatever reason, there's always hope.
Always hope. That's kind of my motto or mantra. As I've been going around and sharing my stories, not only does it give me more hope every day, it refills my hope in me, but my motto is to try to spread hope now, to tell people that it's possible. I have a meeting tonight, a fireside meeting, and then we go feed the homeless afterwards. I get involved in stuff like that. I just fed homeless on Saturday. These are just, I don't say that to brag, but this is where I connect and I can give back. I can live my amends now. I can't pay back everything I've done in my life, Randall. There's no way. A lot of those people have passed on. A lot of businesses have closed, whatever the case may be. So when I see these people and I talk to them and I hug them, it gives me hope, and I can spread that hope.
Well, you're spreading it right now with this podcast.
That's awesome.
You have a hell of a story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Yeah.
It's an honor to have you as well, Todd. Thank you. Our guest was Todd Hall, and you've been watching or listening to another edition of Odyssey House Journals.